co-CEO and president of Third Love, David Spector. And they've actually been doubling down with investing in, opening brick and mortars and doing well. But they've also experienced some of the issues, so we're going to talk all about that. So, David, first of all, welcome.
Great to be here. We definitely have pulled back some, so to speak.
I like to give you a big build-up before you get into the...
You're too kind, Lisa.
Well, let everyone know a little bit more about you before we get into it.
Sure. So I'm the co-founder of Third Love. We're a direct-to-consumer women's intimate apparel brand, so bras, underwear, activewear, loungewear, sleepwear. We're based in San Francisco. We started the brand. We launched it about 8 years ago, and as an online-only business. And in 2022, January 2022, we embarked on a large expansion of retail. And I held back there because we actually opened our first retail store in 2019, pre-pandemic in New York, as sort of a test pilot for the brand, which I was telling Lisa about on our call. It did extremely well. We sort of, I would say, underinvested in it. And one of the things was we built 11 fitting rooms in the store, which I thought was crazy at the time, but somebody on our team did some formula with it. I don't know what kind of formula they used to come up with that. But it was actually too little. And so that sort of, we went right into the pandemic, obviously, a year and a half later, and we closed that store despite it doing incredibly well, and then had the confidence in early 2022 to start launching more retail. So today we're direct, online, and the vast majority of our revenue is online, and then a small part of that is retail.
So, before we get into more in terms of your store openings, I want to hear, what do you think are the main, issues that marketers are having to deal with? We're definitely seeing a lot of challenges, and we've not throughout this conference. We've been talking especially about the economy and just all the issues that are happening. But what is it in terms of the ad buying or what you're seeing that you're struggling with, and you're seeing other marketers are as well?
Well, I usually like to ask at these things, speaking of marketing, how many people have heard of Third Love? Okay, so 80% of people, so pretty good. We're doing our jobs. There's been a big shift in marketing. I'm sure I'm not the first person to talk about this. I'm on the board of IAB as well, Interactive Advertising Bureau, and I'm sort of the token brand guy on the board. They guess they needed somebody that represented a buyer. And I just got reelected to another 3-year term. It's a really interesting place to be. And there's no question that whether you're on the publisher side or the buyer side, the world is changing very quickly. iOS 14.5, I think, started to accelerate that. The run-up in ad costs in sort of 2021 was really the beginning of that. And I think part of that was iOS 14.5, and you had a lot of noise in the market, death of cookie, all these other things that were being talked about, not necessarily implemented, that made a big change. We spend the majority of our dollars on social and search, not surprisingly. And we find that social, and unfortunately, frankly, is the best way to tell our story. And so as a new brand, as a brand that the majority of people, and we typically try to assume that more than 50% of our audience has never heard of us, assume that they don't know what we are or what we do. And so we have to explain to them why we're better than the alternatives. We're not trying to sell a product that women don't already have. And so the challenge is actually explaining to them what's better than what they currently use. And we have found that the best means of that is social. Now, what Lisa and I were talking about, and something that we've struggled with, and I'm sure a lot of you struggle with as well, is how do we invest in brand marketing and actually give the correct attribution to brand marketing, because we know that the brand dollars that we put in are having a disproportionate impact on what we see from a CAC or CPA or however you measure it basis within social or search. Right, so at the end of the day, I like to think of social as just a URL, a hyperlink. Somebody is more than likely clicking on that ad because they saw or heard with the radio some ad from Third Love, and they're more likely or only likely to click on that ad on social or search because they heard that from brand. And now we give no credit, of course, to that brand dollar. And that's where the attribution we have a model for that, but it makes it very, very difficult. And then, of course, we say, well, we want to invest more into social because it's doing so well. And then we always have to say to the team, well, hold up. Are you sure it's doing well? And of course, there's no answer to that.
Well, I know, I mean, in terms of when you guys first launched, especially Facebook was a big part of your growth, and that was what you depended on. But as everyone's experiencing the costs and with iOS and all of that, it's become where it's almost what you want, you have to be a part of. You can't leave Facebook, but at the same point, you're trying to find other ways to invest in other options. So are you dealing with that? Like, how are you handling the knowing that you need Facebook, but you also want to sort of diversify where you're spending your money?
Well, I think, well, let me tell some facts recently. So the IAB just came out with, we do a state of digital advertising report every year with PricewaterhouseCoopers. And we just came out with it for 2022. So here's some interesting stats. The growth in 2022 over 2021 was 12% in digital advertising, which was a huge slowdown from 2021, which grew 35%, not surprisingly, right? Where did that money go, right? What was the disproportionate impact, the diversification that occurred in that spend happened in three places. It was programmatic, digital, all forms of sort of audio and display. And then the other two facts that I actually, that make me really happy is I'd like to spend way less money on Facebook, for example. Social media advertising saw growth of 3.5%, and search saw growth of 8%, with a disproportionate impact going to programmatic and display. And so programmatic and video. And so the challenge I think that we face now is ad rates have gotten better for everybody, so it makes it really easy for a marketer to say, well, we can invest an extra $1 today than we could last month because the prices are better. But I think that the challenge is we're going to get over our skis again, and Third Love definitely did that in 2018, 2019, where we spent way too much money. And in my opinion, it fueled our growth, but it came at a cost. And I think we have to be the rule for our business today is having much more measured growth in light of what's happening in the larger ecosystem. I actually also expect, and we've talked about this, that growth rates will be similar this year. This is what the board of the IAB thinks. By the way, I know there's press people in the audience. That's not a quote. We generally, the thought is growth will slow down at the same rate that it did last year. So, sort of low double digits, if not single digit growth of advertising, digital advertising. Still growing, but still much slower than the earlier years.
Well, all right, so now we come into 2022 after COVID. You had your pop-up and huge success before COVID. COVID hits, all right, that derails it a little bit. But then early 2022, January, you open your first store. And since then, you now have 9 more. So you have 10 stores in total. So obviously, that changes you. You guys are native D2C. Now you have these stores. They're doing well. How have you sort of altered your behavior, what you're doing right now? Let's just, before we even get into the mix, just talking about what you're doing.
Yeah, so we made a decision, and I think actually in part because advertising was just getting too expensive. And we had been, we made a pact, my co-founder and I, to only open up retail stores after Third Love got over $100 million in revenue. So we didn't want to do what other brands had done, where sort of the first thing they do is open up a retail store. And I mean, it's one strategy, but that's not what we wanted to do. We really wanted to prove that this was a category that could be sold online because simply, as the women in the audience know, it's just a category women don't like to shop for in store. It's not fun. It's not something you do with your friends. It's not social in any way. So we actually really believed in the online model and thought that this was one of the few categories that could be sold in an online-only business. But we knew that retail would be a part of the mix at some point. And so we did that test store in 2019, very successful. Lots of things that we learned, of course, too. And then in late 2021, we said, let's go forward again with some very strategic bets. Also, leases and retail inventory was really cheap. And so we were able to quickly sign a bunch of leases when we decided to make this decision at very low cost to us as well, in some cases almost free, to go into retail. And so our first store was actually in Fashion Island in Orange County, which today is actually our worst performing store. Surprisingly, one of our worst performing stores between all of us. And then our best performing stores
Just
actually.
a reminder, this is being recorded.
I don't mind. I don't mind sharing it, but it's not. It's actually more to do with location, less to do with the audience there. But it was our first, and also by the way, it was our first store, so we had a lot to learn from that. And it was a different model than what we had opened up in New York City, which was a street style store. So, anyways, today we have 10 stores. 2 in the Los Angeles area, 2 in San Francisco, Dallas, Chicago, Boca Raton, Philadelphia, Boston. None in New York, actually. We're pretty highly penetrated in that market. Our brand recognition, which could be a good thing from opening up a retail store, but it's just very, very hard to know where to go in New York, so we just haven't done that yet. We decided to pause on opening new stores until we figure a bunch of things out, and everything from hiring to what's the mix of product in the store, because generally people want to walk out with product. And that was actually one of our biggest challenges in New York. Despite having an 1,800 square foot store, we didn't have enough inventory there. And we were like, oh, you can buy it online and we'll ship it to you and it'll be there in a couple days. And everyone wanted to walk out with something. And so we needed to figure out the right mix of inventory that we have there. The challenge for a business in our category is it's very SKU intensive. And in our case, we have Third Love has half-size bras. So we, in some cases, on some styles, within one colorway, we'll have up to 60 different SKUs on just one colorway because we have 60 sizes. And so it makes it very, very difficult to inventory in a store.
Well, and you said it a little earlier. You and your partner decided, all right, we're going to move forward. We're going to do it really efficiently. So what did you stop spending money? Like where did you start like choosing, okay, this is worth investing in and this isn't, especially now that you are dealing with online and in-store? And how did in-store help you in terms of what you were, did you direct in-store towards online? Did you see areas in online that maybe picked up in where you had a store location?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen, I think the general, and I would actually say it's almost a misnomer, idea is that if you open up a retail store in a market, you'll see some sort of lift or brand lift from doing that. I don't necessarily know if we've seen that. I actually also don't believe that because there's so much noise. I mean, you're not opening up a store in Madison, Wisconsin, right, where you actually could see a lift in a market of 200 and so thousand people or something, right? We're talking about Abbot Kinney, right, where one of our stores is. And so it's very, very difficult to measure. People from all over Los Angeles and all over the country or even the world come to that location as an example and come to buy. So how do you actually do a brand lift study and then give yourself more confidence that opening up retail makes sense or investing in marketing for retail? So I don't know if we have an idea. I think that we've certainly shifted some of our marketing resources to put into advertising for the stores. But it truly is getting people to show up and come out, and it generally is related to opening up a new store, not surprisingly, letting people know that we're in that market.
What about in terms of your content, in terms of the advertising and your creative? Were you changing anything around call to actions, or were you being more brand focused? What was the major message?
I mean, I don't know if we've changed that much because we really did build the brand using digital advertising, but we went heavily into brand advertising, which I think was really good for our business in 2018 and 2019. We pulled back from that, like a lot of folks did in 2020. We pulled back from almost, most things. And we actually still did pretty well in 2020. And then in 2021, we started to go back into brand advertising and just advertising in general, but in a much smaller way as a percentage of sort of a share of our overall spend. And I think the problem is, what I always say, and I say this with all due respect, is marketers are generally lazy. And I say this with respect to the extent that they want to find the least and most cost-effective path to spend $1 and to get $2 or 2.5, whatever your ROAS is, out of that, right? So whatever that path of least resistance is, it's not about them doing the least amount of work. It's what's the path of least resistance. And if you find a vein that's very rich, you're gonna keep mining that vein. You're gonna go all the way down to the core if you can, and keep mining that vein to get as much out of that as you can, and not stop, right? And so and that by the way, that analogy plays with sort of, I think of there's a video ad that we've used on Facebook for years, and we continue to pay the content creator a percentage of our spend on that. It's gotten very expensive, but it just continues to work, and it feels like this has got to be dead by now. And obviously, we would see it in the data if it wasn't working, but it continues to work. So we've just continued to mine that. And so the problem with not the problem, but sort of the challenge for everybody is we all know that brand advertising works, but the path of least resistance oftentimes for your marketing teams is social and search. It's the easiest to measure, and the click is all the way through, so you can measure it and have true attribution.
So all right, so it's Facebook and Google. That's the path to go.
Unfortunately.
But can't you get oversaturated, or can't you have that? Where does linear or other opportunities come into play? How about podcasts? Any other? What does your mix look like? I mean, as you even mentioned up front, you're talking about maybe Facebook's getting the credit for that particular sale. But who knows? They might have heard it on their podcast while driving to work, or maybe seen it on a commercial. I know you're not doing TV yet, but I mean, in general, when everyone's looking at where that path to purchase was.
Well, we did TV for years. We stopped the investment 2 years ago, just to focus on other things. I mean, programmatic OTT streaming has been really good for us generally, but those investments again are it's a different analysis that the team uses to make those investments, because again it's very difficult to make the attribution model, which we have. We sort of have a data scientist on our team that focuses entirely on that attribution model. We know isn't overly accurate. Maybe it's getting better over time. Maybe, we don't know. But we know that we generally know, and I think like CPG marketers who are extremely, extremely smart marketers deal with the exact same thing, especially when they're selling in retail doors. So they have no idea whether their ad is actually getting somebody to go to the store and buy. They don't know if somebody's seeing it, in some end cap display. But they look at things on sort of a blended full ROAS basis. And if you invest $1, you're seeing some lift in the next month of 1.5 to 1.7 or something like that of that spend. And so I think we've tried to think of things in the same vein as a CPG marketer. We do a lot of podcasts as well, and we do spend money on things that are like television, and we're going to probably go back into that later this year, that we think are generally inexpensive if you find the right places to put your ad, and good brand dollars. But again, it's not as easy. I think in a world of lowering budgets, you're going to go through the path of least resistance, which generally is Facebook and Google.
Then what everyone doesn't want to hear.
I agree.
I'm curious. Do you? Because I talk to different marketers, and some say yes. Always need to leave that little bit for testing, little bit for trying something, a channel that maybe you wouldn't have used. What's your take on that?
I don't know if we have a specific strategy around a testing budget. I think it's in a world where I think a couple years ago when everybody had excess dollars to spend on marketing, we would have that, but we don't anymore. Every dollar is going into something and is pretty strategically placed. And when we're making a brand investment, we're thinking through it and scrutinizing it way more than we ever did, especially in an area that we don't know. So like podcasts would be the other side of that example, where we know it really well. You can, there's some attribution, there's some data behind it where we know it's working, and we've been doing it for 6 years and have been a pretty big spender in that space. So we know it works quite well for the brand. And by the way, we don't rely on sort of a coupon code or something, like Justine20 or something to be able to attribute back. We do that with hosts, but we don't rely on that to actually make the attribution model work for podcast.
Well, one thing you guys are definitely famous for is, you mentioned it, you have all these different sizes, the diversity of sizes, but your tech, your fitting online, that technology that you guys are using. Talk about that and everything that went into doing that.
Well, that was how we built the brand initially, was how do we bridge the gap between a woman having to buy in a store and being able to do this easily, seamlessly, securely from home. And so we built this technology before AI and ML were a topic, as they have been in the last couple months. And today, 25 million people have taken Fit Finder, which is our online way to get fit. for a bra. It's generally, if done correctly, extremely accurate. It helps lower our return rates pretty dramatically. We've heard it's actually used in some retail stores where sort of if a sales rep is busy, I think I was telling you the story, if a sales rep is busy in a retail store, she'll tell people to go to Third Love and take the Fit Finder, and then come back and tell me your size, and I'll grab you something from the back room. So, we like that. And by the way, it's a huge collector. We have this massive database of email addresses in tens of millions from collecting using Fit Finder, because the only way to get your results is to enter your email address. So it's extremely effective from an acquisition standpoint, and then follow-ups. Obviously, a lot of those folks end up not being, they're real, but we end up going to spam pretty quickly after that, and then we don't hear from them. We're not able to communicate with them. But for those that are engaged, it's a hugely beneficial way for us to acquire new users.
Well, in talking about that with the data, because obviously when you guys first started out, that was a big part of your success, and you were able to collect all this amazing data, which everyone, of course, wants. How does that relate now in store? Are you able to use that data and leverage customers in store, or are you able to continue to get data in store? Do you do anything where then you can leverage that to continue with it?
Yeah, it's a good question, Lisa. I mean, we were. It's funny because I think back to 2019 when in our New York store, the first thing we did in the New York store was you'd walk in and there was this sort of, before you got to even see the product, we'd hand you an iPad and we said, use Fit Finder before you can, come try product on. We had this like beautiful section in the front with iPads set up, like iPad minis, and so we realized that women would just come in and be like, I don't want to do this. I don't have time. I just want to try product on. I've heard great things about this brand. And so we actually have sort of done the anti-technology way of in retail. And it's funny because I think you think back a couple years that people had all these magic mirrors and all these things that I don't think anybody uses anymore because nobody wants that. They want to just try the product on, touch and feel it. So there's nothing that we really do from a technology standpoint anymore based on those learnings. In retail, I mean, maybe there's some store analytics that we use, but outside of that, not much.
Are you seeing crossover from, say, in that geographic area? You're seeing people online maybe doing the fit test online and using your tech, and then they actually want to still go touch, feel, and go into the store and actually buy it.
Yeah, and then that creates an attribution problem, right? So, because we do, I mean, look, we do. Unlike other retailers, we have great, really phenomenal first-party data from Fit Finder, and then just being online only with no, we don't sell our product anywhere else, so there's no shed of that. So we're not driving somebody to go to Amazon or somewhere else to buy Third Love. So we're very fortunate in that way because we can track it all the way through. With an email address, you need an email address to get a receipt from our retail store. So we can use that data to then track back where we found you. Again, we're not all publishers or not all networks share first-party data, so there's like a whole tracking back issue. I don't know if we figured that out yet, to be honest. Again, retail is sort of it's not a huge percentage of the overall revenue mix of the business, so we haven't spent enough time probably yet focusing on that. And again, we only have 10 stores, so I think if we made a bigger push in the next couple of years to go into retail, we probably would be a lot smarter about being able to track where those dollars are spent, marketing-wise.
Well, and so talk about, you mentioned a little bit of the learnings from opening, just 10 stores, but I think that's 10 stores pretty quickly, and especially in a time when everyone's still wondering about the economy. So I think that's definitely a plus, but there must be learnings. You talked about needing 11, fitting rooms, and what are your other valuable lessons learned that can connect both online and in store? Because I know we have different definitions of omni-channel, as we've been talking about, but with having to handle customers in both sides of things, what are you seeing, or what have you learned?
Well, I think definitely, which most retailers don't do this, is collecting an email address, and maybe people are more forgiving of us, and they'll give us their email address to get the receipt because they know we're digitally native or something. I can't quite figure that out, but I mean, you really have to give an email address to get a receipt. I'm pretty sure most of our stores don't have printers in them, so we require that. I don't think legacy retailers could get away with that. It's moving in that direction where on the pad you can verify this is the correct email address for yourself. That is extremely beneficial to connect the two together and have a more robust data set. I mean, I don't know. I think that using, having the right mix of marketing to drive people to your retail stores is very helpful. Again, it's difficult when we're in locations like Fillmore and Abbot Kinney where people come from all over to be able to actually know that the dollar you're spending is actually getting somebody to come into a retail store versus them just seeing you walking by. And so I don't know if I have the best result for it. We do know that retail is generally working for the business and it's profitable for us. So we'll continue to invest in it when we feel more confident. The other thing too is for a while in the last year, retail leases got very expensive, which made us pull back on signing anything new. I think that's going to change the next year or two. We'll see with sort of more legacy retailers shedding excess locations. So if that exists again for us to be able to sign really cheap leases, I think we'll jump on it.
I know you used Leap initially. Is that something you still continue to do, or I talked with other marketers, and that's a less challenging way to open a store, and then you can sort of walk out of it if it's not working.
Yeah, I mean we use them for some of their third party that sort of manages the retail store for you and helps get it open quickly. We use them initially, and we use them for some of our stores today. Definitely a great model. It comes at a cost. And you do give up something with the brand, because you're not controlling it yourself. When you only have one retail store, it's great. If you want sub 5, it's probably great. When you start getting into more than that, you should mostly do it yourself because you have to build that muscle inside your company to be able to effectively execute on retail.
So maybe it's a good way to get started and then kind of see where you go from there. I'm curious, though, when you mentioned that you're not on Amazon, you're not anywhere else, it's just strictly you guys sell it direct. Why is that? I mean, why wouldn't you look for expand your audience by being on an Amazon and just understanding that, okay, they're going to keep the information or the data, but they're at least, selling your product?
I mean, we've looked at all sorts of channels over the years and been approached by lots of people. I think the right deal just hasn't materialized for us that we think would be sort of a net value add to the brand, where the contribution to the overall brand would be positive, not negative. We obviously don't want to give up that direct relationship if we don't have to. So, for example, any sort of a partnership that would provide something in store for us, we've looked at over the years, sort of some of the legacy department stores. We've looked at a few of those, never found the right deal. We actually were in Bloomingdale's early days for Third Love, which was really good for us, getting the word out there. And so it just depends on if it's something that doesn't pull a customer away from our core business. We also care a lot about SEO too. And so we worry a lot about whether or not being on a large platform would materially impact our SEO, because we want to be obviously number one for all of our brand terms.
So, I'm going to open it up for anyone who have questions, but I want one more. You mentioned you need the right mix, but you haven't said your mix. So what is your right mix? That's in terms of your media mix. Where are you investing most of your dollars?
I don't know if we know what that right mix is. We're like everybody else, we're like, playing the game in real time here. So, it's an RTB world. So we're not entirely sure what the right mix is. I think spending a few more dollars here and there in brand is going to be good for our business this year. It was in prior years. Obviously, very hard to figure out how effective it was, which is what the key challenge with it is. But we certainly will go more heavily into it than we did in 2022.
But it's video. I know early on when I spoke with one of your colleagues, that was a big part of your business in terms of getting your word out. I guess maybe that was more as you were introducing yourself to get people to know you. It seems like video was a big part of your strategy.
Oh yeah, totally. And I actually think like when we had a couple good years where we spent a fair amount of money on television, and we also believe that was very good for building the brand. I don't know if it was good for customer acquisition, which are two different things, but I think it was very good for building the brand.
Got it. So do we have any questions out there? Can see anyone. I actually then can have my one last. Oh, we got someone up. All right, I'll wait. Maybe I can.
Hi, I'm Kristen Sword, and I'm currently at Row. And I actually went to your Third Love store in New York back in the day.
Awesome.
So, yeah, I remember.
I was talking about the iPads and everything. Yeah.
Totally, it was like the Bonobo showroom moment. I was also one of the startups that was on Startup
Did you use one of the
Alley.
11 dressing rooms?
I honestly don't remember, but I do remember going. So, given like in this, especially in the younger company space, money is so fungible, and you can spend it incrementally on omni-channel or retail or things that you were saying. Where are you guys looking from a strategic business standpoint on spending the next incremental dollar? Is it on the marketing channels? Is it on expanding retail? Is it on product expansion? Like, how are you all approaching that holistically as a business?
It's a good question. I think I would say probably 2 out of the 3 of the things you named, we are not retail expansion anymore. I mean, it's not a big part of our budget, at least for this year, to go and say we're going to do more retail. I think we're in all the locations we want to be in, probably besides New York. We need to make all of them work, which, like everybody, not all of them are today. We need to figure out sort of staffing and all the little things you have to deal with retail, which are a huge pain, and make retail cumbersome and not a fit for most brands, frankly. But once we do that, maybe we'll have more confidence next year or the year after to start opening more stores. The other 2, though, we definitely are. So certainly product expansion within our sort of core groups of product, and then marketing in new places and just being able to try new things that we didn't do before. I'll give you an example of something crazy that I think was really effective. We advertised on ski lifts in Aspen Snowmass. Actually, no, more than Vail. We did a bunch. There's one publisher that has like the lockdown on the bar, where you have where the map is in front. And we, for 1 or 2 seasons, we had either both or one side of the lift on a certain percentage of lifts. And the number of people that were like, "Oh, I saw you when I was at Snowmass this year" or something. Anecdotally, it seemed like everybody, saw it. I think it was a good branding moment for the company. It ended up being quite expensive. I don't think it is anymore. So we should look into things like that. But I think being able to try really out there things from a marketing perspective, like the ski lift idea, is key, because the normal channels are like, everybody knows those, everybody's there. They're generally pretty expensive. I think it's really hard to go test those things if you're new to it, like television, for example. So, thanks for the question.
Anyone else? All right. Well, David, thank you so much. That was awesome.
Thanks, everybody.